Thank you, Mauricio, for that excellent message. So now, in order for us to be able to understand, I'll translate it into English. And it's Parashat Ekev. For this Shabbat, trying to synthesize so much richness, Ekev has been a real challenge because when analyzing each verse, it is so deep with practical application for our lives. The word Ekev in Gematria equals 172, a very beautiful symbolic number since the 10 sayings, Aseret Hadibrot, are comprised of 172 words. Plus 1, plus 7, plus 2, when added, equals 10, which symbolizes fullness. And 10 is equal to the letter Yud, also a letter with deep meaning. Yud is the smallest letter in the Hebrew alphabet, but that does not give it lesser value. The Yud is the first letter of each line of the Aaronic benediction, the priestly blessing that we recite every Shabbat. It's the first letter of the Tetragrammaton, Yud He Vav He, and alludes to Yisrael, also begins with Yud, and to Yaakov, which also begins with Yud, which has its root in Ekev, and it symbolizes the lowest part of our body that we use to walk on the earth. Therefore, our mission is to enter the depths of the materialistic world and infuse it with the Yud of God, His divinity. Keeping this in mind, we see that this portion holds practical explanation of the commandments, which function as the heel, connecting the earth to the entire body, which connects the lower parts of the body to the upper. Here's a portion from an article by Professor Mauricio Bergman. Ekev is the underground cable, and fulfilling it consequently allows us to grow not only on the material plane, but also spiritually, to be a recipient of blessings of a humble, connected, and grateful self. Working on our own personal skills to enjoy our riches in all its variables. On the other hand, it also refers to the performance of good deeds, mitzvot, that must encompass all parts of the body, from the highest to the lowest. The heel symbolizes the part of the body linked to walking, since the mitzvah is the path that marks the way in which we walk through life. Ekev is also a relational connector, where the causes, consequences, or effects of our actions are revealed. In this portion, we read in Devarim 7:12, "And it will be because you will heed these ordinances and keep them and perform them, that the Lord your God will keep for you the covenant and the kindness that He swore to your forefathers." Later, Moses mentions the consequences of obedience, such as material blessings, the abundance of children, security and peace, amongst the other blessings. However, the Torah warns us of the dangers of excessive material blessing, not born out of an obedient heart, which does not continually remember the Eternal's goodness and allows itself to become inflated, to become Yeshurun, as Moses later calls Israel in Devarim 32:15. I think that this type of blessing becomes an illusion or smokescreen, which can detract us from God's purpose. This illusion is born from an ungrateful heart, as Psalm 103:2 says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and do not forget any of its benefits. Barchi nafshi et Adonai ve'al tishkechi kol gemulaiv." Moshe, enlightened by the Eternal, and with the wisdom of years, gives us the solution so as not to go astray in pursuit of other gods. And one of them is the cognitive power of memory, and calls to our attention that we can remember. In this portion, on 4 occasions, we read that we must remember. First, in chapter 7, verse 18, the Eternal's miracles of salvation when we left Egypt. Second, we must remember in chapter 8:2 our life journey, all the paths that we have had to live to become who we are today. Third, in chapter 8:14 and 18, to remember the eternal. And fourth, in chapter 9:7, to remember our past mistakes and our innate nature to maintain our perspective in this life. I would like to stop at chapter 8, verse 2 to 3. And you shall remember the entire way on which the Lord your God led you, in order to afflict you, to test you, to know what is in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. And he afflicted you and let you go hungry, so that he would make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but rather by whatever comes forth from the mouth of the Lord does man live. When I was reading these verses, the incident of Yeshua in the desert came to me, when after fasting for 40 days and 40 nights, as we read in the Habasorah of Matityahu chapter 4, Hasatan came to him through a physical need, through food, to make the following proposal. If you are indeed the Son of God, command these stones to become bread. When quickly reading this text, one might think that the objective was for Yeshua to perform a miracle of turning the stones into bread. But what is behind it is something similar to what happened to Moshe, for which he could not enter the promised land. The Borei Olam told him to speak to the rock, so that the rock would pour out water. But Moshe, enraged by the people, hit the rock twice. Although it's true that the water did pour out, the glory of that favor from the Eternal was attributed to Moshe instead of the Eternal, as he dictated in Bamidbar 20:12. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Since you did not have faith in me to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel." Something similar happened here when Yeshua heard a voice that probably came from within him, from the conditional factor, if you are, then. This is not about feeding his stomach. It's about feeding his ego, the self, to show who I am and my natural abilities. This was to stop believing in the eternal, to believe in oneself, and to attribute a foreign glory and make it one's own. It is usurping and emptying the divine name. Why? Because he told them, "Speak, open your mouth, like God, to the stones that they become bread." Hasatan was tempting Yeshua to use his mouth or to emit a vibration to create something. So what was Yeshua's Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination, asking of him? To become a new god that day. That is the reason that Yeshua replied that only the Borei Olam, the creator of life, is the eternal. And he cited Devarim. Yeshua had been tested to find out what was within him, and the answer is simple. It was Torah. In the same way that we often wonder why we suffer on this earth, why there's hunger, social inequality, disease, disorder, affliction, death not in its own time, the answer we find in this portion is, first, we need to humble ourselves. That is, to keep our feet on the ground and recognize the good and the apparent bad that comes from heaven. Second, we need to rise up and realize the potential we have. I remember those teachers who were so demanding that they were the ones who helped me discover the potential that I had within me. Third, to discover who we are and what is inside us. Fourth, to put our knowledge into practice. Man does not live by bread alone, but by the words of Adonai. Psalm 119:67 says, "Behold, I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I have become a guard over your word." And Tehillim 119:71 says, "It is good for me that I have been afflicted, so that I might learn your decrees, your chukot." Finally, we read in 8:16, "In order to afflict you and in order to test you, to benefit you in your end." Rabbi Nachman of Breslov mentions this phrase a lot. Everything is for our good, even when it seems to be apparently bad. The Eternal sees from a higher perspective than we do, and our apparent difficulties are ultimately for our own good. I would like to close by making a parallel of a question in the Tanakh. The first one that we read in Devarim 10:12-13. And now, O Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you? Only to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to worship the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, to keep the commandments of the Lord and his statutes, which I command you this day for your good. We read the same questioning in Micah 6:8. He has shown you, O Adam, man, what is good, and what does God require of you? But to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Micah proposes how to expose a Yeshurun, making a call that the base of the self, the ego, does not want Adonai. If we read from 6:6, it's as if a person approaches Adonai and presents offerings from a lower level, lower value, to values of higher rank. He begins with burnt offerings, then a 1-year-old calf, higher commercial value, then thousands of rams and rivers of oil, more value to buy the eternal, and it ends by offering a higher value for a human being. That human life, in this case, that of his firstborn, surpasses any commercial value. What we realize is that Micah does not prohibit the above or indicate that the eternal should no longer be approached with offerings, but tells them that there is a higher value that is born out of our intentions and responds to the question of Moshe in other words. First, return to the Torah. In the Torah we find what is good. It is where Devarim 10:12-13 fits in perfectly, which is to walk in his ways, to love him, to serve him with the right intention and with the soul, to keep the commandments, his mitzvot, of a social nature, that is toward our neighbor, to keep the chukim, commandments that have no rational basis other than obedience. Second, to act in justice, that is, be honest and not be poor-hearted toward your neighbor. Third, put your faith into practice, your knowledge through mercy, rachamim. And fourth, integrate your being, your body, your soul, your mind, your consciousness, your level of balance, to walk humbly, Ekev, with your feet on the ground, with your God. Parashat Ekev, in conclusion, is a call to humility, to connect the heaven, what we breathe, with the earth, what we step on, our lowest part, the feet, with the highest, the head, laying the foundation for a Torah that is practical, full of gratitude, despite the illusions, apparently good or bad, that we live daily, so that is in the end, it will be for our own good. Shabbat Shalom. And that was a message brought to us by Mauricio Quintero. Thank you, Mauricio.